Hey, yo, it's Guido coming at you with a tactics talk and a tank review of the Tier 5 Polish tank, a medium called the 25 TP KSUST 2, KSUST 2. We're going to do an overview. We'll look at tech tree considerations, take a look at the 3D model. We'll do a comparison amongst its peers. We'll look at my stats, my setup, and then I'll have some examples of gameplay at the end. So you can see it here. It's a quite large tank. Over here with the details of it, this was a blueprint tank. Never saw the light of day, developed around 1937, or at least the program was. This is the second version, a more capable version apparently, of a earlier version, which was less capable. But that's about all the verbiage you get up there. You can see that it is a large tank right here. If we look at the T-34, you can see that the T-34 is a bit smaller. The Sherman is taller, but not quite as long. So the Sherman approaches it in size overall. Taking a look at German various Panzer IVs and such, and Panzer IIIs, a bit smaller, more compact. Another Sherman variant right here, not quite as big. The thing about this is how long it is, which is going to affect its turn rate. It's got a lot of weird angles. We'll take a look at that on the armor as well. A couple big turrets. Not as big, obviously, as the main turret, but big machine gun turrets up front. Just a very odd looking. Sort of resembles the Russian T-28, which is a Tier 4 tank to some extent. That's your basic overview. We'll go ahead and get started. Look at the tech tree considerations, because there are some things and decisions you're going to have to make down here. Let me clear up one thing from the earlier reviews that I got a little bit wrong. You see the 7TP crew-wise is running with a commander gunner driver loader. That is the same setup you'll find at Tier 5 and above. Unfortunately, at Tier 3 and Tier 4, for some bizarre reason, the crew configurations turn into commander gunner driver radio operator. Just more reason not to drag crews through those lower tiers. Wait till you get to Tier 5, put a medium crew in the 25 TP, and then you're going to end up fighting there long enough if you're going to grind out everything, or even just grind to the 40 TP after leading it with free experience. You can then start moving crews up. Realize that Tier 7 you're going to change them into heavy crews, so there's still a bit of shenanigans involved with the crew. If you have a Pudel, you bought that one when it came out, you may have a good medium crew already, in which case you'll be easily putting them into the 25 TP, and now you'll have a good crew. Somewhere around Tier 5 and 6, you really want to knock out that 6 cents for the tank to make it really usable at that point. For the 25 TP itself, taking a look at this, you can put the turret on it without the tracks, but you cannot put one of the top guns on it without the tracks. So you're going to want to grind out. You can go turret tracks if you want, or tracks turret. Obviously, if you're just going to lead it with free experience, you don't have to worry about that. But if you're going to start from the base model, I would get to one of these two guns as soon as possible. This Bofors is completely inadequate at Tier 5. Useless, about as useless as the 37mm that I've been going on about from Tier 3 and 4 back in the tanks before it. So those are some decisions you're going to have to make. If you can possibly free experience the tracks, the turret, and at least this gun, although I recommend the top 6 Tier 6 gun, which makes the tank decent, I would do that. But it's going to depend on how much free experience you have and how you're doing this grind right there. Those are the tech tree considerations for the 25 TP KSUST. Let's move on. Next we have the 3D model, and here it is. You can see this kind of goofy looking thing. Taking a look at the thickness, you've got 45 on that flat plate on the front. You've got 25 on the angled plate down below, but it's quite angled, and on the upper piece right there. Survey device. You've got 45 on that flat plate and 45 on the two turrets right there, machine gun turrets, but the face is 80, that big flat kind of face on the turret, although realize it is relatively narrow. This is not a gun mantlet here, it's only 85, or 80, sorry, not 85. You've got to go to there before you get that thickness of spaced armor on a gun mantlet, and that's just a very small target, and obviously the gun there as well. When you get into the side of the turret here, 80 there, and then wrapping around to 70 and 50 on the sides, and the side of the tank on the whole is 40 as well. The roof at only 20 up above right there. Overall, a decently armored medium tank. And we'll look at that when we get to the comparison. It doesn't really hold up because it's going to end up seeing Tier 7s and Tier 6s. We'll talk about that a little bit as we go. The idea with these tanks, at least as what it appears to me with the Polish mediums, is that they're kind of an armored medium with a decent stick, with a pretty decent hard-hitting gun for its tier. How that actually works out or not is a little bit different than I think they intended. This one happens to be decently speedy. When you get to the next one, the speed really drops off. We'll talk about that when I do my review on the next tank. But this one is a decently zippy tank, even if it can't turn very well as far as the sharpness of its turn. That's a 3D model. Let's move on from here. All right, let's look at the comparison. I got the 25 TP on the left and some of its pure tanks from various nations. As usual, these are 100% cruise, top modules, no equipment or consumables or paint. You can see that firepower-wise, it's at the top. 135 average damage, only beat out in this group of tanks by the derping 350 Panzer IV-H, which is going to have a bunch less penetration and the best penetration in class at 135 with the top gun. So in that case, once it gets to the top gun, it's actually a pretty capable tank. Even with that, its rate of fire is right up there, not top in class, but pretty decent. Fires pretty quickly with a 4.79 reload time. That's near the top, but it's really not that big a deal. It's only a second less than some of the faster ones, or a couple seconds. And if you're talking the Crusader, but the Crusader is really spitting down low penetration kind of rounds quickly. But this thing is actually throwing down range 135 pin rounds with a pretty good alpha. Traverse speed for the turret is fast enough. It's actually one of the top in the class. -10 is very comfortable with the depression. +10 is not. I did find some issues with looking up with this tank. It gets elevation locked and you can't shoot things above you in certain cases. So that's actually very painful right there. 2.4 on the aiming time is okay, not great, with a dispersion of 0.36, which looks good on paper. I will tell you that this gun felt a lot derpier than those stats would indicate. Not really sure what it was, although I will say all Tier 5 tanks have pretty inaccurate guns, so it may be a case of that. I might feel the same way about the rest of them if I was playing them concurrently. The average damage per minute, finally, the tank before it was abysmal. This one is right in there amongst some of the middle of the pack, although it's not at 2,738 like the Panzer IV-H. Of course, you're shooting HE on that one, so that's a little bit off. As far as that number, you got to get some pins going on there. Survivability is where you see some of that armor coming forward. It's got that 45 hull. Not good as the Panzer IV-H. Not good as the 3-4 over there, or even the P-43. But I'm not going to call it usable. You will get the occasional good bounce with weird angles, but it's not something you're going to rely on. The turret armor is actually quite good at 80 on that big face piece. So as far as popping a turret out, I did get some pretty good bounces off the turret. It is a bit rounded, and if you're moving back and forth to spoil their aim, you can really have a okay time with the hold down turret act with this tank. So not bad as far as that goes. Again, don't rely on it, but you're going to rely on it more than your whole armor. Anytime you can hide a part of your tank and shoot, that's a good idea. But at least in the case of this thing against peers and lower tiers and some higher tiers with bad pin, you're going to do okay with the bouncing. Well, so here's the mobility that's pretty good. It's actually got a 500 horsepower engine, which is right at the top with this horsepower per ton at 18.92, which is pretty good. Not as good as some. You can see that some of those tanks are quite a bit faster, but its top speed, once it gets there, is right up near the top at 56. So it does take a while to get going, but once it does, it's pretty good. But the problem is you then get into this traverse speed problem where it looks good on paper, but because it's such a long tank, it really has a hard time turning right or left tightly. It's just going to be like a big boat turning around in a circle. Sitting still and spinning around, it does okay with, but turning is pretty miserable. That's going to talk to things like tracking, running away, going around corners in cities tightly, things like that. Does not do that very well at speed. Concealment, it's one of the worst in the class, as you can see. It's just a great big tank. It's not really going to hide from anyone unless it's outside of view range or something. View range, speaking of, is 350. That's decent. And then signal range, whatever, 430 is actually one of the worst. So 430 is pretty miserable at that tier. They must be using smoke signals. I don't really know what's going on with that, but apparently it had the worst radio ever for a prototype tank. I really sincerely hope Wargaming is not using, is it signal range? Signal range as one of their balancing measures, but I suppose anything's possible. All right, that's the comparison. Let's move on. All right, so how did I do with the 25 TP? You can see I've got 32 battles down here. Took me 32 to get through it. Realized I did upgrade everything with free experience, so I did not grind any modules on this tank. The tank before it, I ground most of the modules. In fact, I skipped a couple, but I started from 0, and it took me 41 battles simply to unlock the next tank, which was a lot. This one only took 32 with fully unlocked modules at a 53% win rate, 692 average experience. Results may vary. Obviously, if you run a 60% or more, you might be able to knock 4 or 5 of those battles off. But hitting at 62%, there's that kind of derpiness of the gun. 53 victories, battle survived 40%, which is pretty good, right about where I want to be. Damage ratio 2.16, which is good. Destruction at 1.84. You can see the armor is near useless at 0.18. That's where I said sometimes you'll get good bounces, but don't rely on it. Clearly, this thing got penned a lot. Experience at 692, average damage caused 803 and 371. The tank before it, my average damage caused was 300 something. So this one I did quite a bit better in. Damage received 371, assisted at 176, and the spotted and destroyed is okay. The destroyed's a little low at 1.09. It's not exactly where I want to be. I'd like it to be more like 1.5 to 2, but there you go. If you take a look at other peer tanks, the 25 TP at 53% with a 692 experience and 803 average damage. If we go up to the T34 and compare it, the T34 is at 726, but less average damage of 705, and I ran a 70% win rate in 82 battles. So it compares to the rest of my tier 5 mediums that I did decent to good in. Those numbers check pretty closely. I did not manage to ace it in those 32 battles. Only managed the class 1. If I played it some more eventually, obviously I think I would get that mastery going on right there. But that's how I did in the tank. Let's move on to my setup. All right, as far as setup, what you're going to find here is that I have stripped everything off. So let's go ahead and bring up the rest of the polls so I can tell you exactly what happened here. I have moved on to the 40 TP. So what I was carrying in the KSUST was the medium caliber tank rammer, the vents, and the enhanced gun laying drive. So I've moved that on to the next tank. In addition, let me jump back there because this was the crew that I had in the tier 5 25 TP. They have since got their first skill, but I did not get to their first skill. I got to about 89, 90% or so on their first skill, and this was the crew out of my Pudel that I had played a little bit, but had not played enough to get one skill done. You can see now that they're in the next tank, they've got their one skill, they've got the 6th sense, and they're starting to be a bit of a better crew. So those were the setups as far as that goes. I told you I had the top modules from the very beginning. I was running 32 AP, 12 APCR, and 6 HE. It's got plenty of ammo. And then a small repair, small med kit, and a large fire extinguisher. I do not know what the tendency for these to light on fire is. You could certainly run food probably and take a look at it yourself, and if you get lit on fire too much, then go ahead and change that out. That would obviously help with the gun issues. Having a crew that had brothers in arms would also help with the guns issues. So if you were running food, brothers in arms, and the other various things that help out with aiming, you probably find yourself to be a bit happier with the gun performance on there. But as it was, I was about halfway on the top gun performance that I could get based on my setup. All right, let's go on to some examples of gameplay for the 25 TP Polish Tier 5 medium. Here's the first example of gameplay of the 25 TP KSUST 2. You can see that I'm here on Muravanka. It spawned into the south spawn, and this is the first game after driving the Tier 4 for so long. I actually spent quite a bit of time camping in this bush back here, afraid for my life because I expected this tank to be as bad, even though I knew objectively the stats were a lot better, and I'd upgraded it, and I'd put equipment on it. But I've only got a Largo, an M5, and a Sturv. We sat there for a while. We saw quite a few over on the west side, and I decided to go ahead and move up. And what you're going to find with this tank is it's just simply a lot more comfortable than the Tier 4. The gun is actually pretty good. So as I come up here, I'm going to end up finding some bad guys to shoot. There's a pretty good amount of tanks over on the other side there. There's the first customer. I got a Matilda giving me side armor. There's kind of derpiness that goes pretty much nowhere. Let it aim a little bit. There's another miss. Holy cow. Just using the turret there. Another miss, having a hard time with the gun. There we go. Now it's getting in there. Dropping 123 on the Matilda. This is gold, by the way. A 154. A miss or a bounce, whatever happened there. So 4 shots, 2 for damage. And maybe it was 5. I don't know if I fired a couple AP before that. Got a Churchill. That's going to be a bit of a problem. I'm going to need gold for that guy probably. But we do not seem to have many of their tanks. There's a lot of TDs in this game, so I expect a considerable number of them to be sitting in the back. And I do not want to be hammered by ones that might be camping back there. Covenator gets through, but the Matilda BP should be able to handle him. And we're watching this Churchill, trying to figure out what he's doing. 34S shows up. Did not see him till right about there. And you can see that nice minus 10 degrees. Not bad. Dropping some shots on the 34 shielded. Down to his lower hull, and we take him out. Now I've got 5 rounds of AP left. I've got to shift over to the Churchill. Coming around behind him. Probably not the best move here. You see that circle-wise, look how big that turn circle is. I can't even get around tightly. That's basically maximum turn until I stop turning right there. Stop to get that last shot, and I end up eating a shot from the Churchill. There's max turn again. It just takes forever to get spun around. Take an aimed shot into the turret, and we'll take him down. And right off the bat on the first game, I've dropped 1,000, and not a terribly spectacular fashion or game, but compared to the tier 4, just a much more comfortable tank. I am top tier, so that does obviously help. This is a 510. So we're going to move on in here and try to take out this last TD. Got an M5 Stewart, hoping that he will light them up. Being a bit lazy, I probably should have come off to the right a little bit over there, down through this lower ground, but I just sort of cut off this corner and go straight at him. I suspected as soon as I got up on top and I didn't get shot coming out there that he probably wasn't sitting in one of these bushes. He must be a little bit further back near his cap. So we're going to come on up here and look for this guy. There he is. Not nukes our TD. I miss. So there's that gun handling. Can be quite goofy. Fortunately, he misses. And now I'm just doing the old turret poke with him. Bam. Not enough armor to stop him from punching right through that turret there. And I'm not going to get a piece of that SPG. He dies to the 14 TP. So there you go, 1,138, 61 assist. Couple things to note right there. Decent mobility, terrible turning. The gun is punchy at tier, but a little bit wonky like all tier 5 guns tend to be, even with the top gun right there. But just if you went through the tier 4, believe me, this is, I'm not going to call this a great tank, but it is just much more comfortable to play. Let's move on to the next example. Next example is a bottom tier game. I'm here on Erlenberg. Spawned into the south on an assault mode, and I'm going to go over to the east side and see what I can do about holding on over there. You can see that we got a Chaffee, and look at the massive dispersion as this thing is moving. The shot's going everywhere. This one's pretty funny. I think this one goes way over to the right. So I'm just taking those, praying that they'll hit something, but at that distance, most guns in the game are probably going to struggle to hit at that distance, but you can see this thing has absolutely no chance whatsoever. The moving dispersion is massive. So I'm going to go over to this hill right here and try to get some spots for my campers sitting back in town. You can see the guys, as far as the south town goes, the Scorpion on 3045. We got some heavies filtering up through the middle there. So I'm going to come up here, use these trees, and you'll note that it's got some pretty good depression, and occasionally it will hit at range. But like any tier 5 medium, it does struggle in that regard a little bit. Come up to these trees, we'll take a look. We got a 1S sitting there. No problem pinning through the side of the 1S. We'll just shooting back up. I do not have 6th sense, so I'm going to courtesy back up on those shots, even though I think the trees probably have me covered. The problem with those trees is there are just some spots where you aren't covered. Don't know if he ended up seeing me. Miss him. There's that derpiness of that gun. And he gets nuked by the Panzer IV-H. The Panzer IV-H, who shoots an HE shell. I can't hit him with my gun, but he can blap him with the slow velocity HE gun. Another scout up on the middle there, starting to look in there. We'll take a shot. There's a miss. Oh, that actually hit him. Look at that, but I did not penetrate. That's just bad gunnery. If you shoot behind a guy, then you're going to miss. Had to wait for the trash guy to go by. All right, there's a hit right there. He's behind that fence. That shot's too low. Goes too low, and we end up getting that scout down. Now the plan is, since this tank is decently mobile, if I get pushed here, I'm going to run off. But I've got so many guys down in the town, I feel like I can get some lights and they'll get shots across at them. Keep them honest, but all of a sudden we've got this 40 TP, or sorry, another 25 TP, not a 40, sticking himself up over there. And there's a critical no damage blocked off those tracks, or the front of the tank with an angle. KV-85 kind of stupidly sits there, and this gun's going to have not much trouble. You notice that I'm just shooting HP at the side of this tank, having a pretty good time. There's a T-67 probably spotted me, but he's ignoring me for the moment. He's dove off the hill. I'll just check him right there, seeing where he goes, and thinking maybe I'll get a shot on him as he runs in here. There we go. Kind of lucky on that. I was actually aiming a little bit behind him, and I just got a shot, and that one misses. Again, a little late on pickling the shot off, but he just runs in there for some reason. I'm not really sure why he's charging in. Probably because his team is losing. And now I'm trying to figure out, all right, we got guys all over the cap, which means the majority of those tanks minus the 67 are either on the bottom of this other side of this hill I'm on, or they're in those trees back there where they're starting to find one of them, at least, the P-43. There's the T-25, so that's 3 of the 6, which means the other 3 are probably up in that corner. This guy decides to just go ahead and push in. I've got the drop on him hit points wise. He's shooting that 40mm Bofors thing. So he's still on the stock gun. You can tell by the multiple hits. I'm going to try to charge in here and get some more hit points, but we end up winning because they're capping for some reason. Can't quite figure out. Last but not least, I've got a good example of what this tank can do if you're careful. So we're going to come on in here. Siegfried line. It's an assault. We're on the attacking side. You see the 2801 goes in, and I'm going to come up here and see what he spots. There's no artillery, so I can use this spot a little bit more comfortably. I've got some guys right off. I choose the T-67 because I know I'm going to have a better time pinning him. But he backs off smartly, and I switch over to the 3485. If he sees me, he's not paying much attention. And there's a miss. So a couple carefully aimed shots, a couple hits, not quite zoomed in on the third one, and a miss. I'd love to go help the 2801, but if I come up and over, then those guys will all be shooting at me as soon as I'm spotted. 3485 is behind the building, so I actually take the chance then and try to get in here. I switch over. I found the 25-2 coming. Take a shot and back down. Looks like I tracked him. I think I may have tracked him again, and I believe a couple of these actually hit him. I'm going to take one more shot in there. 1 or 2 of those actually hit. I'm going to end up with about 2,000 damage in here, but only 1,600 showing. There's a shot on the T-67, kind of a low percentage shot, but it ends up going in where I want it. And since we've dealt with a good chunk of the guys on the wing there, and there's a couple heavies, a KB2 and a 3601 sitting there, I'm going to shift. And this is where you got the strength of a medium as far as being okay in mobility. In the mobility department, I'll just move my tank to a different part of the game, or a different part of the map. Once they get them lit up in there, I realize there's actually a few more in there than I thought, so I'm going to swing back around, kind of change what I'm doing, and come in here and try to help them take out the last of these guys. I know this pillbox is here, so I'll move up into it to use it as a bit of cover. There's the T-67. Having a hard time getting my gun on him, and I get a good RNG roll. I've been playing for a while by the time I played this game, so hands getting a little bit tired. Now you'll see that the gun will struggle against things like turrets That's just a plain old miss. And down he goes. MT-25 scouting in the back corner there. We'd love to get rid of him so we can move into the town without being immediately spotted and hit by guys who have shots on us. There's a shot, doesn't kill him, but he gets destroyed by the T-20. So I'm going to actually fade back towards this part of the town, go back to where the O-knee is, the O-1 experimental, and try to make sure we get rid of this KV-2, who's in trouble. He's getting hit from several directions. Hoping I can get a shot in on him. I'm going to tuck into this little nook, but he dies. Spin around. I push number 2. I'm facing a T-29 and some other things in here with good armor, so let's go ahead and start using the gold here. But he is not interested. Those guys over there shoot. I'm just waiting for that T-29 to come out. Now I'm taking a look at what the T-150 is doing. Put a shot into him. P-43 bumps me, and I'm thinking, you know what? Let's change this fight. There's no reason to go pushing out with those guys. They're all getting each other's way. There's another angle over here we can start creating. And that's where the T-29 is. I would love to avoid getting hit by him. Take a look. He's not paying attention. I'm going to nicely zoom in to the lower plate. Get a low roll, unfortunately, at 110. That's a miss. Or I bounce. He shoots. Whether it was at me or the other guy back there, I don't know, but we end up taking this guy down. Now I've got the 150 and the stirb. The 150 is not really paying attention. I'll just come around, put one into his lower plate. Down he goes, and now we've got the stirb 74. Actually has a pretty decent turret. It's kind of a similar idea to this turret. Very soft hull. Turret's not amazing, but it can bounce. I'm able to go through. Of course, I'm shooting gold right there. Up to 1600. All there is the Eagle 7. This ends up being about a 2000 damage game with the damage from the blind shots into the T-25. But that's kind of the classic capability of a medium, able to get to one part of the match and then flex quickly to the other part. I actually started flex and then changed my mind, helped him clean up a little bit there in the south field, and then pushed into town and gobbled up a bunch of hit points. While the heavies were busy shooting at our heavies, you can move around, change your angles, come from different angles because of your speed. And that's pretty much about as good as this little tank is going to get. Well, that is it for the review of the 25 TP KSUST 2 Tier 5 Polish medium tank. Overall, pretty good tank. It's a solid, capable medium tank. I think it may feel like it's even more capable just based on the misery of the grind for especially the 3 and the 4, on how bad they were in the 4 particularly. Since you're coming to this tank right after the 4, you're going to feel like this is a breath of fresh air. But in actuality, it's a decent Tier 5 medium tank. I wouldn't call it the best, and I certainly wouldn't call it the worst. You're going to have a good time playing it as long as you enjoy World of Tanks. I would suggest, though, that you fully upgrade it as soon as possible. I mean, I know that goes without saying, but in the case of these Polish tanks, the stock guns are so abysmally terrible, and for some reason they rarely carry one of the good guns from the tier below into the next tier, although this one does. Carries the mediocre Bofors in. Do not use that gun. But everything elited or top modules, or at the very least the top gun on this tank, makes it a capable Tier 5 medium tank. Alright guys, thanks for tuning in. As always, I do appreciate it. Keep on supporting the channel, and we will see you.